Ever since I first caught wind of Eiyuden Chronicle 100 Heroes, I was completely spellbound. As the spiritual successor to the original Suikoden games, it's the masterwork of the late Yoshitaka Moriyama, who poured his heart and soul into the game before he passed away in early 2024. And after several years of development, I finally got my hands on it. But does it provide the same level of enjoyment of the old Suikoden games and properly replicate their essence? I'm gonna let you know in this video. Before I do so though, please like this video, subscribe to my channel, and let me know if Eiyuden Chronicle 100 Heroes has been on your radar, and if you plan on giving it a try in the comments below. The world of Eiyuden Chronicle 100 Heroes takes place in Alran, a diverse land of many cultures and values. The story starts out in a remote corner of the world, where the main character Noah decides to join the Watch to help people and explore. There's the big burly leader guy, the mysterious traveling swordswoman, and the conceited gal. It's your typical ragtag group from the frontier. Also, it's worth pointing out that Noah fights with these cool one-handed blade slicer thingies. It certainly doesn't get much better than that. Anyway, in the process of seeking adventure, Noah and his new friends take part in a joint venture between the League of Nations and the Galdian Empire, one-time foes who are working together on a joint mission. In the process, Noah and the Watch meet Sane, a gifted young lieutenant of the Empire. As they journey into the forest and then the rune barrows, they learn that the Empire has discovered technology that amplifies the power of rune lenses, devices with magical energy. They also find out that their secret objective is actually to retrieve a primal lens, a giant rune lens with legendary power. After finding the object, 6 months pass and it's revealed that the League of Nations has allowed the Galdian Empire to study its power. The only problem is, the project is being run by the ultra-ambitious Dukes Aldrich, who basically reeks of Luca Blight in every single way. In fact, there's vibes from Suikoden 2 all over the intro of this game, with a tenuous peace being threatened by the fires of war and conquest. The visuals in Eiyuden Chronicle 100 Heroes are mostly a throwback to the great RPGs of the past, but with a few twists as well. The actual approach is something of an HD 2D style, but with larger character sprites. As the story plays out, you're also treated to distinct sprite animations that seem totally designed for specific scenes, and that was a total throwback to Suikoden 2. Even in the game's first hours, there's a refreshing mix of regions with color schemes to fit a diverse array of locations. In the game's first hours, you've got your lush green forests, dark and mysterious dungeons, sprawling towns, desert cliffs, and even a sunset on a bridge. There are also a lot of environmental graphics like leaves falling to the ground and lighting effects. And take a look at this Asian-inspired palace. This, in my mind, was truly one of the most beautiful parts of the game. Everything works in tandem to create a world that looks much bigger than it actually is, and I enjoyed the scenery throughout all of it. The vibrant colors really remind me of the old days, and the art style fits the game well. Everything just blends together. If you remember how battles worked in the first 2 Suikoden games, you are in for a treat here, because there are a lot of similarities. You have parties with up to 6 characters with 2 rows. And if you recall how the long, medium, and short ranges worked in those games, they're pretty much the same here, but the names are replaced by front, rear, and support. You're forced to work around these limitations when you're choosing the 6 members in your party, and that's still frustrating to an extent. But this also encourages you to experiment with a lot of the characters rather than just sticking with the same ones throughout the game. In combat, there's also a turn gauge in the top middle of the screen that shows the turn order, and this is crucial when it comes to helping you decide how to plan out your moves. Choosing to attack with a speedy character rather than using a healing item, for instance, can mean a game over. Eiyuden's auto feature has been revamped quite a bit. Instead of just having every party member attack like it did in the first 2 Suikoden games, auto makes each character act in predefined ways that can be tweaked by the player. For lack of a better description, it's a programmable AI system that lets you decide what the characters do when specific conditions are met. I haven't actually messed around with it too much, but it seems like the default settings for most characters seem to fit what I'd prefer them to generally do in random battles anyway. I really enjoyed using the auto option for most random encounters while carefully planning my moves during boss encounters. And if you're a customization fiend, you'll absolutely love this system. And speaking of random battles, they are few and far between. So much so, in fact, that the random encounter rate has to be the lowest of any RPG I've ever played. And I have to say, I ended up liking this. I can see how it can become a double-edged sword if you wanted to grind a bit, but I really enjoyed how the low encounter rate allowed me to focus on moving through the dungeons and paying attention to the puzzles within them. And when it comes to puzzles, a few of the beginning dungeons had almost none to speak of, but the difficulty does ramp up and you eventually enter dungeons that require a lot more puzzle complexity. This one had me using switches to guide me down different paths, where I had to reach the end of each to illuminate the runes on a final door, which only opened after all paths were completed and explored. When it comes to battle commands, attack and item are pretty self-explanatory, but special attacks consume SP, which replenishes gradually if you don't use an SP-consuming attack. Rune attacks consume MP, which only replenishes through items or by resting at an inn. And finally, there are hero attacks, which combine the turns of 2 or more characters to perform a special attack together. If you remember Suikoden's Unite attacks, these are essentially those, with the only difference being that these ones consume SP, so they can't just be spammed every turn. The whole system is designed to closely emulate, though not totally replicate, the experience we all remember and loved. There's also an added twist with some boss battles, which have special combat mechanics called gimmicks. Through these gimmicks, your characters can actually interact with objects on the battlefield to avoid attacks and even unleash special ones against the enemy. For instance, in one fight, rocks fell down onto the battlefield, and in order to avoid a powerful laser attack, my characters had to hide behind them. In another, timing my attacks on a switch allowed me to drop boulders on the enemies rather than suffering the damage from them. This added a fun dynamic to a lot of battles, and it functions as a way to keep the player on their toes in key moments. Eiyuden has a big, beautiful world map, but this one is unlike the Suikoden games you're probably used to because it isn't just an overhead 2D one. It's kind of an isometric one where you can rotate the camera, and it reminded me a lot of what Square Enix did for Star Ocean: The Second Story remake. It'll turn the pages back to the 90s much better than any of the games with the silly interconnected node map screens, and I really enjoyed it. The music that plays while you're there is also one of the best tracks I've encountered in the title so far. I was also impressed that there's a map that is easy to toggle into to get your bearings and see where the next storyline objective is located. I used this a lot to make travel easier, and I was able to find some hidden treasures because of it as well. Now, it goes without saying that any spiritual successor to Suikoden would have to include castle building, army battles, and one-on-one duels, right? I mean, it just wouldn't be the same otherwise. Well, yes, Eiyuden has you covered in all 3 of these areas. You'll obtain your castle about 6 hours into the game, and once you do, you're able to name it and start recruiting characters just like in the old days. Some characters will offer to join after you complete basic quests, like finding other NPCs or retrieving various items. For others, you just have to listen to their story or take in some dialogue before they'll be willing to join, like the battle-hardened samurai Xygor here. Unlocking new characters allows you to use them in your party, and also opens new possibilities for the development of your castle. Unlike in the old days, where most of these castle expansions happened automatically, Eiyuden requires you to make tough choices when it comes to allocating your resources. You use a special interface to do this, and some of the buildings have special prerequisites, like the recruitment of specific NPCs, specific buildings that already exist, and raw material thresholds. The army battles are a much bigger visual spectacle here, relatively speaking, and coming into them, I wondered if they'd be more like Suikoden or Suikoden 2. but after experiencing them, I can say they play out a lot more like Suikoden 2, where your units are on a grid with special combat objectives to fulfill. When your own units clash with enemy units, the camera pans down onto the battlefield, and you can catch a glimpse of the health meters of your major units while the fighting plays out. After enough damage is done, units will also decide to retreat back a bit to recoup. Allied unit stats, height advantages, flanking, and other factors seem to play into the results, and it's a real treat to see firsthand. I really enjoyed the rush of nostalgia these gave me because it felt like a more advanced version of the old army clashes I remember so well, and I know I'm not the only Suikoden fan that does. It's just a timeless part of the franchise that's replicated extremely well here. And remember the one-on-one duels that became such a recognizable part of the Suikoden games? I mean, come on, who doesn't remember Tyr McDole versus Teo McDole from the original? Well, fear not, because the duels of Eiyuden function almost exactly as they did back then. Characters engage in dialogue with each other in each round, usually leaving clues as to what their next move may be. The choices are slightly different, with attack and counter always available, but with break as a special attack that's only available when the tension gauge is full. One thing I really have to applaud is the voice acting. In fact, I think the voice acting of Eiyuden Chronicle is the best I've ever heard from a retro RPG. It really is that good. The developers used a diverse array of voice actors, and the talent was appropriately matched to the proper characters. None of the dialogue seems forced at all. Some of the standouts for me were the voices for Gar.
Hey, it is what it is. Going forward, Noah chooses our teams.
Noah.
But my situation's changed, and I have to leave through that gate.
Sane.
We're prepared to leave at once. Is this agreeable to you?
And Duke's Aldrich.
Swear fealty to me, and the entire league will be yours.
I also really like the choice of using British accents for the Galdean Empire characters. This makes them sound distinct and identifiable. The music score's really good too, with my favorite tracks being the world map, which I did mention before, along with the castle theme. There are some ambient style songs, but I enjoyed the melodic ones most because those were the ones that brought me back to the old days. The only major annoyance I want to point out is the odd camera blur technique that's sometimes used. In games like Octopath Traveler, blurring in the background is a distinct part of the whole HD 2D experience. I realize that, and I love those games. But in Eiyuden Chronicle, I think it's really overdone. There are times where you'll be seeing major events play out and large portions of the screen consumed by this odd, muddled visual effect. It's dreadful. But thankfully, you can cut back on this annoyance greatly by toggling the depth of field setting to off in the graphics settings. And sure, there are other small annoyances that some could raise, like the inability to save outside of save points and the limited inventory space. But both of those things are genuine reflections of what Suikoden was. So even though I don't think I would have minded too much if those things would have been a little less limiting, I can understand them at the same time. When I take it all in as a whole, Eiyuden Chronicle 100 Heroes is everything I wanted it to be. It brings everything I loved about the first Suikoden games into a new adventure, with an interesting plot, fun characters, the visual style I really enjoy, the army battles, duels, and runes. Basically every single aspect I could have asked for. One of the great things this title makes clear is that it isn't just trying to honor RPGs from the 1990s. It's actually a total tribute to the gameplay mechanics and visuals that deliberately echo that era as well. In the review kit I received, it's made deliberately clear that it strays from modern RPG trends by design, and I couldn't be happier with that choice. So yeah, Eiyuden really checks off all the expectation boxes. But beyond that, it offers an experience all its own. And while I've been repeatedly comparing it to the first two Suikoden games, its story in particular really stands out in its own way as well. In this way, it's both Suikoden and its own thing, and that's good. This is definitely one of the best retro-style RPGs that's been released in the last 2 decades, and I think it beats out both Sea of Stars and Chained Echoes. I'm still on the fence as to whether it's truly better than Octopath Traveler 2, but I'm leaning in the direction that it is. This is a can't-miss title for everyone out there who loves the genre, and fans of the early Suikoden games will absolutely eat it up. But what do you think about Eiyuden Chronicle 100 Heroes? Are you planning to spend time playing it, and do you think it can live up to the standards of Suikoden? Let me know in a comment below. Make sure to like, subscribe, and click the bell for more retro gaming content. Thank you to all my Patreon patrons and YouTube members. If you're watching this video and you want early access to the videos I produce and other perks like they receive, please consider supporting the channel by becoming a Patreon patron or via the YouTube Join feature.